Welcome to Pre-Lesson C. This is where we're going to talk about first meeting. We're going to talk about what happens when you first meet a Japanese person and what sort of conversation takes place during that first meeting. There are three phrases that are very important that we're going to learn right away. And that first phrase is going to be hajime mashite. Hajime mashite. Now that she near the end is not pronounced fully. It's kind of compressed up against the te sound. So it's not hajime mashite. That would sound very foreigner. You don't want to sound like a foreigner. You want to at least sound close to the Japanese way it's pronounced. So you're going to go ahead and compress it to hajime mashite. Mashite. It's almost like the I isn't there. Hajime mashite. Hajime mashite. All right. Now, in English it says, nice to meet you, or how do you do? But those aren't really what it means. That's kind of an approximation. That's what we say when we meet somebody. We say, nice to meet you. And at that exact moment, Japanese say, hajime mashite. But if you really looked at this, if you knew the kind of the back end of this phrase, it's really like, oh, it's a first. It's the first for us. So it doesn't really mean how do you do. So you shouldn't expect that if you say hajime mashite, they'll say, oh, I'm doing fine, because it's not that kind of a thing. It's kind of like in English when we say, hey, how do you do? Oh, nice to meet you. How do you do? We don't really say, I'm doing fine after that. We just go, oh, whatever. We don't, maybe we do. Maybe some people do. But this is just a rhetorical question. Don't think about it. It's not a question in Japanese, though, at all. It's just the first thing you say to somebody. Never say it to somebody that you already know. It's only always said to somebody that you just met. So if you say, nice to meet you, again, to somebody that you know, well, it's obvious that you forgot about them, right? So, hajime mashite. Now, the response to this is going to be, you're going to say who you are. So this is that phrase. Maru maru to moshimasu. That's right. I said maru. We learned maru in the counting prequel lesson from the last video, right? So maru means circle. And when you have maru maru, it just means blank. It's like saying a blank. So, maru maru to moshimasu. Now, your name fits where that maru is, okay? Maru maru to moshimasu. And what this means is, I am called. Literally means I am called. So for me, I am Joji. So I would say, Joji to moshimasu. And you bow a little bit. Joji to moshimasu. It doesn't have to be one of those long, those big bows that you see like on TV. It's just a casual Joji to moshimasu. And you can keep looking at them too. You don't have to not look at them. There's a lot of variety of this bow that it's not. A lot of times people get hung up on the customs of Japanese and they overthink it too much and then they go really, really crazy on it. We even in this lesson talk about a 15-degree bow versus a 30-degree bow. And in some sense, the deeper the bow, the more important it is. But in this case, I want you to remember one thing. You're not Japanese, so you're not going to be held to any standard like they are held to until you get really good in Japanese. And also, even Japanese people are very casual about this. Hajime mashite, Joji to moshimasu. Might look at you, might not look at you. But just keep it normal. It's not like they're the Klingons, and if you say something wrong, you're going to get killed with a bat'leth. You know what I mean? All right, so something to moshimasu. Now, let's talk about another phrase that if you are using another book, or if you have a teacher that's teaching, you might have heard this. You might have heard that you should say this when you meet somebody. Watashi no namae wa maru-maru desu. Watashi no namae wa maru-maru desu. Now, this just means my name is maru-maru, right? The problem with this is the only people that ever say this are people like you that are learning Japanese. Japanese people don't ever just say, my name is George. We don't do it in English either. We go, hi, nice to meet you. My name is George. We don't do that, and the Japanese don't either. The people that do it in Japan are foreigners and 5-year-olds. Japanese children introduce themselves like this. They'll say, hajime mashite, watashi no namae wa Tanaka desu. And they'll say that, but you don't say that. I want you to say the very cool. Let's back this up. The very cool maru maru to moshimasu. Let me give you a small story. I went to Japanese school when I was 17. First I begged my Japanese teacher to get me into the Japanese school. I was living in Japan, and he couldn't get me in. So I had another path through a teacher I was helping teach English. There was a man named Mr. Bastischek. We all called him Mr. B, and I was going with him around teaching English. I was helping him out. And one of the places that we went was a school called Kodai Nikko, which is it's a high school. And the teachers there knew me, and I said I'd like to come to the school, and they let me go to that school. And in the very beginning, when I went to that school, actually, you know what? That's not even the story I was trying to go with. But let's just act like it was. No, we have to change the story. I'm sorry. I went to Japanese school, and that's how I got in. That wasn't the story. I used to go to a lot of Japanese schools to visit. So we had a club called the Discover Japan Club in my high school in Japan, which was on a military air base. And we used to go to high schools, and that was the story that I was really trying to think of. And one of the high schools that we went to, I had just learned the tomoshimasu thing, and we went, and we had all of the children lined up. Okay, there was like 7 kids from their school and like 7 from our school. We were all Americans, and each one of the students were saying, "Watashi no namae wa John desu," in their very American accent, or "Watashi no namae." Let's say they were really good. "Watashi no namae wa Amy desu," and they were saying their names. And then I'm like, I'm not going to do the "Watashi no namae wa" thing. And I said, "Joji tomoshimasu." And the entire crew of kids were like, whoa, because it's the normal way to say it. And all of the foreigners were doing the typical way that foreigners speak Japanese. But what I did was say, hey, I know normal Japanese. And I want you to have that same experience. I want you to say something tomoshimasu and at least be normal. This is how Japanese say it. All right, that was a long story and the wrong story to start with, and I apologize. One of these days, I will talk about Japanese school. As a matter of fact, you can just go look in the videos. I do have a whole thing where I talk about it. It's called Japanese school, I believe. All right, so let's not say "Watashi no namae wa something something desu." Let's say "Hajimemashite, Joji tomoshimasu." Okay, there's a simple, if you can't remember Joji tomoshimasu the long way, and it's hard, it's a little bit hard, you can do this. Just get rid of the "Watashi no namae wa" part, and you can say your name, desu. You can say, "Joji desu." Now, this is a little bit more casual. Now, typically when you first meet somebody, you're not speaking casual. You're going to be polite. So this isn't bad, though. If you can't remember anything, just say your name, desu, and it means I am this name. And by the way, even though that is pronounced, it looks like it's pronounced desu, and just like this last one, tomoshimasu, that is silent. The final U sound is silent. It's very common in a lot of Japanese words that they don't overpronounce that U. Tomoshimasu. There's always the exception. There will always be the one person that says tomoshimasu. But we're not going to do that because it's not common. It's much more common to drop that U sound and say tomoshimasu or desu. Very important to sound natural. Final phrase for this section is a little bit of a complicated one. It's just a little bit hard to say, and the translation can get a little bit weird. This is what you say after you say, "Nice to meet you, I am so-and-so." Then you say this. This is the final thing. "Yoroshiku onegai shimasu." "Yoroshiku onegai shimasu." "Yoroshiku, yoroshiku, yoroshiku onegai shimasu." Now, what this means, in English here it says "best regards," but I'll tell you what, in an earlier version of the book, it said no adequate translation. We didn't have a translation because this doesn't really mean best regards. There is no really good translation. If you broke it down, it means I request goodly, and that doesn't mean anything. But I think that gives you a hint of what it's trying to do. It's saying, look, let's be nice to each other. From this point forward, let's, it's good. Me and you, yeah, it's all good. That's what you're saying when you first meet somebody. "Yoroshiku onegai shimasu." I request of you niceness. That's really what you're saying. "Onegai shimasu" is a request. It's another way to say please. So please be nice to me is probably the best translation for this, okay? Now let me give you an example of where "Yoroshiku onegai shimasu" is used in a completely different situation. Right here we're using it where, nice to meet you, my name is George, let's be nice to each other. It's kind of a nice cultural phrase. But I could say it to somebody that I didn't just meet. Let's say I have a friend, okay, this is my favorite example. I'm at a party, and there's an amazingly beautiful girl, like really beautiful, and I'm single, right? I'm single, and this beautiful girl kind of crosses our path, and I go, "Whoa, that girl's beautiful." And he goes, "Oh yeah, that's my sister." "It's your sister?" Then I could just say to him, "Yoroshiku onegai shimasu." Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Whatever you can do for me, please. I'm begging you, please. That means let me have a date with your sister, right? Maybe you're doing a business negotiation with somebody, and at the end of the negotiations, you'll just say, Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Like we presented our case. Please be good to it. Here's what we want. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Super, super important phrase that I promise you will hear over and over again. All right, that is it for now. Please come back for the next part of this lesson where we talk about how to say your age and a fun phrase that we can do that most books I wish would teach, but they don't, that makes your first conversation really fun. I'll see you all then. Bye.